Hello, welcome to another Stannard Snapshot. We're in the end of the month of October and coming to you live again from Page, and very glad to be able to give you some more updates, and we hope that you won't tire of hearing about Life Beyond Ministry and the adoption, but that's another big event in our life, and we know many of you have been praying about it and have been expressing interest about knowing what's going on, so we thought we'd take another month, if you don't mind, and share a little bit more, not looking at what's happened, but looking at what lies ahead of us. Part of the reason for that is that we're beginning to get a little bit closer to the new year, and as we get closer, Lifeline, our adoption agency, has suggested that they're hoping travel would resume in the early part of the new year, which means that slowly we're beginning to see some of the steps necessary for travel begin to pick up a little bit, and what that means is planning and preparing, securing visas, and making sure everything's lined up and in place. And for us, that involves a few extra steps, partially because of the complications of our process, and so we wanted to share some of that with you because we have some big prayer requests for some things that will be coming up hopefully within the next month or two. And so one of the things you've been praying for and we're super thankful for is that we would be able to travel as soon as possible, and we still would like to ask you to keep praying alongside of us for that. But once we do get to travel, the complications will likely begin, partially because we're working with 3 different countries at once, so the US, China, and Hungary. And as many of you may know, working with one country and politics is complicated enough. You throw in 2 more into the mix and things get even more complex. And so just to share with you a little bit of what we anticipate lying ahead of us is that one of the first steps we'll be doing is attempting to secure a visa to travel to China. Now, getting a visa is usually not that big of an issue because we have legal paperwork showing why we need to go there. The big prayer request we have is the length of the visa that they'll extend to us. And so the last time we went to get Elijah, we were only able to secure a 30-day visa. And some of you may remember that that was not nearly long enough, and so we had to try and renew the visa while within China. One of the reasons we're fairly certain that we were only granted a 30-day visa is because of the nature of our work and what we do. And so based on that, China tends to offer only shorter-term visas for those who are in any type of ministry. So one of our big prayer requests we'd like to ask you to join us in praying for is that God would grant us favor, that we would be able to successfully request a longer stay visa. Each time we've applied, we have requested a longer visa, but then it's up to the consular as to what they will actually grant. So we'd like to ask that you join us in praying that we would be granted a longer visa. We anticipate that we'll need at least double the amount of time, so not 30 days, but at least 60 days, if not longer. And so we pray that you would ask that you would join us in praying for that. And one of the many reasons why we need a visa that will be longer is that we do anticipate that once travel opens up, we will be subject to a 14-day quarantine upon arrival. So that automatically tacks on 14 days to the trip. And so you can imagine if you have a 30-day visa, and the normal process for those adopting from China who are coming out of the States, they're in country for 2 weeks, 1 week in the child's city to finish up paperwork and legal steps with that, and 1 week at the American consulate to finish up the American embassy side of things. So when you throw on 2 weeks of quarantine, that already pushes you right at the 30-day limit. And so that's one of the things we expect to happen, is to have a 14-day addition to our trip on the front end, plus the normal 2 weeks. And then on top of that, what we have to do is we're not able to travel from China to the United States because our adopted son will still be a Chinese citizen and would therefore need a visa to go to any country. And he will not be granted a US visa because we don't live in the United States. And so because of that, there's the expectation that we'll return to our home, which is what we plan to do. And because of that, he doesn't get issued a US visa, which means that we are instead applying to get him to return to Hungary. Now, the Hungarian process is where things become a little bit more complicated, because for someone who's going from China to Hungary long term, the requirements are that they not apply for a normal visa like some of us might do to travel to another country, but that they actually go ahead and apply and receive permission to be granted a residence permit. Now, normally the way things go for us, for example, is that we arrive in country in Hungary, and then while in Hungary we apply for the residence permit. But the rules that govern the interactions between China and Hungary basically flip the process, and so they say that for Chinese citizens they need to already have secured permission to have a residence permit before they can be granted a visa to travel to Hungary. Now, where that throws in some wrinkles is that that's a fairly lengthy process in and of itself. So normally just to secure a visa, as you might know from traveling before, it takes maybe a few days to a couple weeks. But in order to get a residence permit, it's a far more lengthy process, more complicated, more paperwork's necessary. Now, the plus side is because we have to get residence permits ourselves, we already know what paperwork to bring with us, and so that's not the big issue. The challenge is how long it will take the immigration office to review the case and make a decision. And so what will happen is we'll go to the Hungarian consulate and basically turn in the entire file with the paperwork. The Hungarian consulate will then have to translate some of the official documents, the adoption certificate, birth certificate, and a few other papers from Chinese into Hungarian, which will take a few days. And then at that point, the Hungarian consular will send the entire package to Hungary. And so at that point, it will be in the immigration office in Hungary. It will no longer be in China. Once it arrives in the immigration office, no news goes in or out of that immigration office until the immigration office makes contact. So in other words, it's not possible for us or anyone in Hungary or the Hungarian consulate in Hungary to request status of the case. The only thing we can do is wait. The only way we would get contact from the immigration office would be if something was missing and they needed to request something additional, or once they've rendered the final decision. Now in the past, and with Elijah's case, there was an official timeline of 20 working days, so not including weekends, 20 working days for them to render a decision. And what we were able to do is submit a request for them to expedite the process, which they did, but that still took, I believe, somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 business days. Because of the pandemic, everything has slowed down dramatically. And so we just found this out recently as of July, we had to apply to renew our own residence permits. And the official time has been extended from 20 working days to 70 business days. Now, we do plan to submit a request for expedition again, and we do also expect that they will do their best to honor that, because we'll be able to explain our situation, that we're in a foreign country and we aren't able to travel and go home until we're granted this permission. However, that being said, we also do anticipate that even with the process being expedited, there's a fairly good chance it will take as long, if not longer, than the last time. And so if you've been sort of following along with the timeline counts, what that means is we're looking at 2 weeks of quarantine, plus 2 weeks to complete the adoption, plus however long it takes for a decision to be rendered, which we expect will be somewhere probably in the ballpark of 2 to 4 weeks. So there is a reasonable chance that we could be in China somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks or longer. So we would ask that you be joining us in prayer, that when we apply for the visa, that we can get granted a visa that's significantly longer than 30 days. Because if we have to apply to renew from within China, that poses some challenges. One is that there's no guarantee that it'll be automatically renewed from within China. So there's always that challenge and stress. And the second one is that during the time that it's renewed, we have to, our passports are required to be in the office, which can be up to a week at a time. And for those of you who travel, probably know this, you never feel comfortable when you're in a different country without your passport. And then in addition, we'd like to ask that you would pray even now and join us in prayer, that as we begin to look at the steps, and we're specifically talking with Lifeline about ways we might be able to shorten the timeline a little bit, anything we can do in advance, that we'd be able to come up with some creative solutions, and that you can also be praying alongside of us that our request for expedition will not only be honored, but will be really taken seriously, and that the expedition process will go significantly faster than we anticipate. So, sorry for the long message, but we just wanted to share with you a little bit about some of the things we anticipate happening, hopefully, Lord willing, beginning to possibly apply for the visa in December, so a little over a month, and then if God is gracious to open the doors, possibly traveling sometime January, February, March, And along with that, we do ask that you would continue to join us in prayer that the travel would happen sooner rather than later. So because it's already a fairly extended period of time, the longer this gets pushed back, the more problems it causes us for some of the other things we anticipate happening later in the spring, such as defending my dissertation or some changes we anticipate happening in the summer. So yeah, just lots of things to be praying for. We're so thankful that you are praying for us, because God works through prayer and He's pleased to answer our requests. And so we do pray that you would join us in that way. The more prayers that we have, the better. Not because it changes God's mind, but because God delights to work to answer the prayers of His people. And so we do pray that you would and ask that you would be joining us as we beseech God for these things. And we're super thankful to know that He's got it all in control already. Thank you so much for your prayers. Thank you for your support. You guys continue to be an enormous part of our ministry, an enormous part of our lives. And so we're thankful to be able to share things such as this with you. We'll look forward to seeing you next month on the next Stannard Snapshots. Bye.